Since well before Victor Hugo looked up at Notre Dame and thought, what if a hunchback lived in there? Authors have been inspired by Paris. The Storytime in Paris podcast will help keep this tradition alive with interviews and readings from your favorite contemporary authors with a French connection. Every episode features 5 questions asked by you, our author's biggest fans, and answered live on air. Then our authors will treat us to a reading of an excerpt from their book. Who knows? Maybe you'll even be inspired to write your own great French novel. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity. My guest this week is Taret, the Franco-American author of It's Never Too Late to Bloom. When her book was first published in French in 2017, it met with rave reviews and astonishment, since the concept of late blooming isn't one that exists in France. Her book was published more recently, at the end of last year, in English. Catherine's book is an inspiring blend of memoir, self-help, and storytelling. She takes us through her journey of self-discovery and acts as a sort of guide to help us non-judgmentally navigate ours. So, without further ado, please let me introduce Taret, author of It's Never Too Late to Bloom. Hello, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Will you tell us a little bit about you and your work?
So my name is Catherine Taret. I live in Paris. I'm a writer. I'm Franco-American. I just wrote a book about late blooming. So it's called It's Never Too Late to Bloom. And it's about my adventures as a late bloomer between Paris and New York. And I'm very happy to share some insights with you today.
Perfect. And normally I ask people their connection to France, but I think your connection is probably fairly obvious.
Yes. My father is French and my mother is American. So she came here to study and she met my dad and she stayed here. So I was born in France. But my father used to work in airlines and for an airline company. So I traveled a lot and I spent a lot of time in the USA. But please excuse my English. Sometimes it's a little French because I live here. But so yes, I have both connection to both countries.
That's very interesting. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions now. And my first question ties into that, I think, pretty naturally. You talk in the beginning of your book about how this concept of being a late bloomer comes more naturally to the American culture than the French one. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that is?
Yes, sure. Actually, that was the starting point of the book because I had a lot of trouble with the fact that I was late. You know, I was always late in my life, when everybody was getting married or everybody was, finding career they wanted or having kids or et cetera, et cetera. I always felt like I was not there, not there yet. And it was very difficult to live through this time period in my 30s. And so one day I went to see a sidekick in Paris, and I had no idea she was actually American too, but she was half American. And so I was telling her about all this, drama I was going through in my head with the fact that I was, I felt that there was something wrong with me. And she told me, you're just a late bloomer. Everything's going to happen later in your life, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So, you're a late bloomer. And I walked out of that meeting with her and I felt so much better. and actually the word late bloomer was a word that I had heard, before, obviously. But as it doesn't translate in French, and actually the concept does not exist in French, I had never really thought of it. So actually when she told me I was a late bloomer, it struck me that it said a lot about the cultural difference, one of the cultural differences that we have between France and America. Where in America, it's very, like it's no big deal. I mean, people need to reinvent themselves a lot in their lives, probably because the life in America can be more harsh than in France. In France, we have a system which really protects us. When you lose your job, you have 2 years unemployment. When you get sick, you have social security. You're taken care of. I mean, it's kind of it's a life where there are no big surprises, or if there are, you can the government is there for you in some way. So people are not expected to reinvent themselves. People just follow a path, and in France kids are asked to choose what they want to do with their lives pretty early. So that's the hard part, because obviously when you're a kid, you have no idea what you want to do. So when you're 15, 16, you just have to choose a path and to choose a certain type of studies. And so that can be difficult. But then, you're kind of on your path. And in America, it's very different, because the system obviously is not as protective. So I think people it's just natural that you're going to change, careers, and you're going to have to adapt, and you're going to have to find solutions. So there's this agility, and the fact that, you're late is not even a question, because it's more pragmatic, I guess. And so this is, for me, this is a very big difference. And I think people in France over maybe the last decade, we've started, talking about the fact that people felt stuck in their careers, and there was very difficult to change your path. And so it's starting to, people are really realizing that they can bloom differently than what they're told. And so I found it very interesting, and it was all because of that encounter with the psychic, actually, that I got to think about all that, and found it was very interesting.
It's kind of amazing that a psychic sent you on this whole path.
Yeah, it is.
I also think it's really interesting, this difference that we have in how we approach our careers, the Americans and the French, that is, how we approach our careers and how we approach sort of that life path. And I think it is changing here a bit. I think also we live so much longer now. It's kind of silly to choose something at 16 and then just do that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's crazy. But, we also live in a time where people are becoming successful very young in the media, not everybody, but some people, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on the younger people. And I remember when my book came out in France, I had young people like in their 20s, or not even, they hadn't even graduated, and they were writing to me saying, this book is really interesting to me. I feel worried. I feel worried that if I choose a path, I won't be able to change. And this is very difficult. And how do I do that? How do I go about and, making choices in this context? And they know that the choices they made when they're young are important. And the pressure is higher because of the success of the internet guys, and girls that we all know. And it just puts a lot of pressure.
I think that's really true. I hadn't really thought about that in terms of late blooming, but it leads me to my next question, which was, have you gotten a different response from different people? Like if the French responded differently to your book than Americans, for example?
Well, in France, when the book came out, it was very interesting because it was a new concept. And so there were a lot of, articles in the media, and I did a lot of interviews to explain it, and people were really intrigued. And the feedback I got from a lot of different people was very liberating, very, oh, this is so great. Thank you for sharing this, because I feel so much better knowing that I don't really need to achieve everything before I turn, 45 or something. In France, you become a senior at 45, in companies, or you're like a senior citizen at 45. So it's really early, and it's very difficult for people to project themselves in their future and then their blooming and in their, desires and ideas and projects because of that, because they think that they have to achieve everything. And I'm not talking only about careers. I'm also talking about, the private lives or personal projects, love and having a family. And yeah, a lot of people are sometimes a little miserable because they feel that their life is kind of over or they don't have anything to expect, or they can't, start anything new because they're just, approaching their 40s or 50s. So this is very strong in France. And I don't think it's as strong at all in the States. I don't think so.
You talk a lot about your relationships in the book. You talk about romantic relationships and friendships, and certainly your relationship to your sister and your brother. Has there been any resistance to the idea of late blooming from the people closest to you?
That's interesting. Well, this book actually was, for me, it was, I kind of bloomed with this book. I hope it's not the last time I bloomed, but it was a blooming experience, because I had wanted to write a book for a long time. And I think it was really a matter of finding a way to express things and talk about my life, because I'm an introvert, quite shy. I don't talk about myself a lot, even with my family or close friends. I like to listen, and but I felt deeply that I wanted to, share these things and these insight that I had and this experience that I was living. And so writing this book was kind of like coming out, like this is who I am and this is what I feel, and I'm going to share it with the world, and that means that it's also sharing with my family and my closest friends, and I think probably a lot of them discovered some aspects of me that they were not used to. And but I got a lot of support. Really, I didn't have any. The book in my own life, it was very positive, and it created a lot of new experiences and new relationships and interesting discussions. But I knew that it would be, I don't know, I would be different once the book was written. It's like I'm pretty sure it's like having a child. It's like you've unveiled part of yourself, and it's no longer inside you. It's outside, and everybody can see it, and it's in the world, and it makes a difference made a difference in my life, and I always feel that once it was out, I was there to support it, to talk about it like I'm doing right now with you. But it also it still has a life of its own. And I feel very happy about that. It's really weird in some way. But I'm very happy when people tell me, oh, I bought your book. And I'm like, no, it's not my book anymore. It's your book. Now it's your book. And it's just out there and doing whatever it needs to do, and I'm very happy about that. So it's been a positive experience. No drama, no family drama. Maybe the next one will be more complicated, but this one went fine.
We'll be right back with Storytime in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Storytime in Paris. There's a quote that you have in your book that I actually have been carrying around in my wallet for, 15 years or something like that. Yeah. From Marianne Williamson. And I'll paraphrase, but I think part of what you do in this book and part of what you talk about in this book is when you allow your own light to shine, you unconsciously let people around you give them permission to let their own light shine.
Yes. This is such a good idea, Jennifer, to have this in your wallet. I think I want to do that too, because, I love Marianne Williamson. Yes. I follow what she does, and she's very inspiring. And this quote is very inspiring to me too. And I kind of tend to, thank you for for sharing it again with me, because I tend to forget about it sometimes, uh, although it's so important, and it's and that's why I like to share. Since I wrote this book, I talk about myself more because I talk about the book, and the reason I do it, even if it's not always easy for me, but the reason I do it is because I feel good, and I also I really love that it creates discussions, and it's, the topic of blooming is so positive. Even if you feel you're not in a good place in your life at some point, and it happens to me, it happens to everybody. Just the idea that, there's a cycle, and that you're at this point, but the energy and the circumstances, and will change or can change, and some other things can happen. I mean, this is so helpful. This has been so helpful in my own life, and to be able to share what I believe is really, it's very positive, and I hope it's positive to others. So kind of a positive circle. How do you say, un cercle vertueux, virtuous circle?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's really a sense in your book of embracing who you are without judgment, and just not really needing to know the ending, but just sort of experiencing what's happening, which is really lovely.
Yes. Yeah, that's really interesting, because we are all there's a suspense in life, right? We don't know what's going to happen. So that can be scary, but it's also exciting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like to think of that. Even when I'm not happy with my current circumstances, I like to think, you don't know what the next episode will bring. So, keep watching the series. Keep, hang in there.
That's what I tell myself too. If you think of this idea of someone being 45 and being a senior citizen,
Yes.
You think back over like what's happened in the first 45 years of your life and how astronomical the changes have been. And then imagine you're going to live to 90. You're going to do all of that all over again. We can't possibly predict the ending.
Yes, exactly. And also, I think, when you're young, when we hear people saying, it gets much better and much easier when you get older, and life's better, and I was always thinking, yeah, right. And now that I'm 46, and I can feel it, I'm very surprised, because I never really believed it. But secretly, I was always thinking, no, I don't believe that. But now, I think it's really interesting. And so, this idea of being a senior, I mean, it's totally, I mean, it's totally stupid, but I hope it changes. Really, I really do. I hope it changes. And demographically, it should change anyway. So I hope this kind of topic helps. Anyway.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that makes your book so unique is that it starts with this interaction with the psychic, and then you integrate this idea of numerology into all of your chapters.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what numerology is and how it influenced your work and your life?
Yes, that's very interesting. Actually, I went through this phase where I was a little lost in my 30s. And so that's when I went to the psychic, and I explored a lot of things. I was, in France, we're very rational people. That's our cultural heritage, and we're not a very spiritual people at all. And so we used to be, at some point, at some level, I guess we are, but people are really kind of shy with anything that's kind of, not rational. But so I decided that I wanted to explore other things when I was in my 30s. So and one of the things that I discovered was numerology. It's difficult to say it in English, but so it's like I just came upon this idea, and then I met a lady who was numerologist and a teacher. And so it's all about, it's kind of an ancestral knowledge, if you will, that numbers are symbolic, are symbols. And in all cultures and religions, you have certain symbols and meanings associated with certain numbers. And so numerology just says that life is, it's based on the cycles, the idea of cycles that we have in nature and that we have in our bodies. It's the same. We go through cycles in our lives. So you have small cycles, which are 9 years, 10 years for some people, but 9 to 10 years. And then you have large cycles, which are like 10 or 20 years. And each cycle has a certain energy, which is a number. And so you can calculate this. And you know that just as in one day or in 1 week, you don't always have the same energy. Sometimes you feel tired. Sometimes you have very great energy. You're very dynamic. You want to start things. Sometimes you need to, you know that you need to think. Sometimes you want to be alone. Sometimes you want to be together with a crowd. I mean, your energy changes. That's the same idea in numerology. You go through cycles which have numbers, and so your energy changes. And I really like this idea because, I think we live in a time where we're expected to be always, creative, always dynamic, always smiling, Instagram generation, and just, being conscious that we are not always at the same level of energy. We go through different things, and it's okay. And at some points, we just need to rest. And sometimes we have this great energy, and we should put it to use to do something we want to do. I like this idea. It just takes away the guilt, and that it's a cycle. So all these phases are coming back, and it's like day and night. So I thought it would be fun to write the book. I mean, to structure the book around one cycle of 9 years. So from year 1 to year 9, and to see what happens in one cycle. Each year has a different energy. And a different ambiance, I would say. And I thought it would be fun to see if what happened that year in my life was in line with what the numerology said. So I don't want to spoil you, but it's not always accurate. But it's still fun. It's still fun, and I thought it was a very interesting way to express the idea of cycles, of life cycles. So that's why I chose that, and really look into it because it's really a fun practice.
Yeah, it definitely piqued my interest. One of the photographs that really caught my attention in your book was towards the end, where you show all of your journals and the clippings and the quotes and the notes you taken, and it made me really curious about your actual writing process. So firstly, what sorts of things inspire you enough to collect them?
Oh, interesting. I'm a very messy person, so I don't have, some people, and that's what you should do actually, because I work for a creativity school, so they would kill me if I said anything else. But officially, you need to have a notebook with you at all times, or your phone, and very neatly write the ideas that come up, or the inspirations that you have, so that you can find them when you need them. But I don't follow the rules myself because I'm very messy. So I have a lot of, I have boxes of Post-its and little clippings of stuff that I don't know why I just keep. And I have a lot of boxes at home, and I have, writings here and there. And so it's a big mess. So actually it was, when I wrote the book, I thought, it would be fun to just, gather all that stuff and see what's in there, and so I looked at everything, and that's why I put some photos of that in the book, because it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I love seeing that.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't think that the way you do it is important. It's just when I'm inspired by something, I just try to capture it because I know I'm going to forget it. So I just write it down, or I take a picture. My phone is very useful because I don't have any nice pictures in there. I only have things that I need to remember, like, oh, I need to buy this book, or, I saw this quote, or I want to remember this person, or whatever. So, so the writing process is I think it was very interesting to me because for many years, I knew I wanted to write a book. I knew I wanted to write, and I wasn't doing that in my job at first because I was working in marketing. So I changed jobs and I became a copywriter. So that was writing. I started writing for work, but I knew I wanted to write a more personal book. And for many years, I didn't really know what would be the angles, maybe for 2 or 3 years. So I was just, I think, gathering ideas, and I don't know where it would go, but just gathering ideas. And when I had this meeting with the psychic and the late bloomer topic emerged, it kind of everything came together, and I decided on this angle when I talk about late blooming. And then with this angle in mind, I went through all my ideas and thoughts and insight that I had kept over the years, and I found some very interesting stuff and stories, and that's how I did it. And then I transformed my apartment in, like, the CSI, the series, where you have all that stuff for 6 months on the walls. And that was fun. That was an interesting period of my life too. And then, that's it. And I think having things visually, to see things, I think that's why they do that. And the police and the investigators and everything, because you really get ideas, and links between ideas, form. And I think it's something that helped my brain. I wanted to write a book with a lot of visual things, but since I'm not a good, I don't know how to draw, or I don't know how to take good pictures, I just used whatever I had, the material I had, and I put it in the book.
Yeah, your book has a very visual aspect to it, which is
good.
Nice. Yeah. And do you still do that now? Do you still write and research in the same way, compiling random things here and there?
Yes, I do that because I've been interested in another topic for the past 2-3 years, and so I've started. I mean, I don't do it. I just, it comes naturally, but I can see that I've gathered a lot of material about that new topic, and I don't know how the process will. I hope something will emerge soon because I really want to write another book. But I'm kind of trusting the process. So yeah, I'm still doing that in a slightly less messy way, but it's still a bit messy.
Very interesting. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors, and when we come back, Catherine will read to us from the beginning of her book, It's Never Too Late to Bloom. And now, back to Storytime in Paris.
Remember Carpe Diem, the famous scene in Dead Poets Society where Robin Williams encourages his students to seize the day because in no time they will be fertilizing daffodils. He's quoting an illustrious verse by English poet Robert Herrick. The poem was first published in 1648. Since 1648, a lot has happened. Revolutions, airplanes, vaccines, feminism, rock and roll, the internet. Lifetimes are longer. Opportunities have multiplied, and we're less bound by that infernal ticking clock. We don't have to get married at puberty anymore, and many of us hold out a good deal longer. And yet, I feel that we still live our lives, possibly more than ever, in the age of startups and social media, according to Herrick's fast withering cycle. We are expected to reach the peak of our lives, to have achieved our great accomplishments and gathered all the bountiful fruits of existence in the blink of an eye before the first wrinkle appears. After that, what's left to care about? Honestly, before I turned 30, I didn't care. Time was on my side. I was born in France in a bicultural family, an American mother and a French father. I first flew across the Atlantic at 4 months old. I took my first step when I was 1. I was talking when I was 2. I learned to read at 3. I started my first diary at 7. I skipped first grade. I was engaged at 19. And at 23, I had graduated from 2 Ivy League schools in France. I even hit my midlife crisis at 29. I was this close to becoming an early something or someone. But in my 30s, things changed. I went to 15 weddings and not one of them was mine. I bought Oshkosh overalls for half of the newborn babies in Paris, none of which were my own. I worked on many exciting creative projects, but I was never at the head. I had lost my thunder. And I realized what happens when you don't gather your rosebuds while you may. Guilt, stress, anxiety, depression. Thoughts started swirling around my head. I'm not a doer. I'm not cut out to do something creative in these creative times. Someone will end up doing it better. Nobody's interested. You need to have a blog to write a book. You need to have a book for people to read your blog. I'm bored out of my mind. All the good ones are taken. I'll be alone all my life. It's too late. The end. That's when I started to care and worry. I might have had the same concerns anywhere in the world, but living in France, the pressure was tremendous. In the land where the age of enlightenment once sparked, you don't wander off the main road, and changing course in life is to be avoided at all costs. Until recently, the French had to decide on their line of work by age 17 and seldom changed careers. They rarely moved abroad or strayed away from their social backgrounds. What can I say? French people see life as a straight and pleasant highway, adorned, whenever possible, with good wines, good books, and good lovers. Who can blame them? Yet, they are not at all used to the idea of going off the beaten path, and so they have little sense of direction. In contrast, I've learned from my mother how differently Americans think about their life. In order to reach the American dream, there are many bumpy roads and dead ends, and Americans seem to have an inherent ability for adapting and reinventing themselves. Although I carry both of these conflicting genes, I have been brought up with the French idea of choosing and sticking to the program. So let's backtrack to that moment when I turned 30 and started caring, with absolutely no insight into late blooming or any other kind of blooming for that matter, merely driven by the fear of missing out on my life. I set out on a quest to find my missing thunder. It eventually transformed into an adventure to reclaim my relationship with time from all the authorities who were trying to steal it from me, society, education, biology, and all the rest. The novelist Anne Dillard, who pocketed a Pulitzer Prize the year I was born, wrote, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What is time but life itself? It is my life, so it is my time." This book is my diary, a corpus of stories, thoughts, resources, and notes I gathered randomly over 10 years of my life, which I spent, sleeved, rolled up, knocking down all the beliefs and unfortunate circumstances that were preventing me from thriving. I'll be throwing in a song or photo interlude here and there to complete the picture. Bear in mind that for the most part of the decade, I didn't know about late bloomers, and I had no clue that I could be one. But as I recount this adventure, I will be sharing what I've learned along the way about late blooming from my perspective today. Have I bloomed now? No spoilers.
So what's next for you? Are any of these late blooming projects coming to fruition? Can we expect another book?
Well, yes. So I'm actually working on family ties and what we call in French psychogénéalogie. I don't know how this translates.
Psychogenealogy.
Yes, psychogenealogy. It's a big word, but the idea is very simple. It's how are things transmitted in families, you know, from your ancestors to yourself. What do you inherit, you know, and how does it work? And how does what your ancestors lived impact your life? So that's the idea in a nutshell.
I love that idea.
And there are a lot of things about that. I think I'm really, really kind of obsessed with the idea of freeing myself from a lot of things that I inherited. And I think in the late blooming book, I really explored whatever education and society wants you to believe. And I wanted to free myself from that. And I think I did it by writing the book. And now it's kind of like going deeper. That I realized that probably in my life there are a lot of things that are dictated by, how can I say, forces that are bigger than myself. And I found a lot of things in my family that were very interested in secrets and, a lot of things that echo in my own life and that happened maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Yeah, it was very interesting. So that really, I wanted to understand. So I studied this topic very closely, and I've learned a lot of things, and I want to do something with it because I think it can really be helpful to a lot of people who don't know that. But I have no idea what it would feel like. But something's coming, I know.
Well, I will definitely want to read that when it comes.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And to that end, where can people find you if they want to follow you and get your book and all of that? Where can people find you online?
Oh, well, my book is on Amazon, and for now, because of the COVID and everything, for now it's online, and I have an Instagram and a Facebook, and anybody can reach out, and I'm very happy to talk about late blooming with people. I love to talk about late blooming with people, so please, if anybody wants to reach out, please do it. I'd love to chat.
And I'll include links to everything too, so people can find you really easily if they want to.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh yeah, for me too. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I wish you a lot of success with your podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to Catherine Taret for such an inspiring conversation. Please join me next week when I'll be sitting down with author Janet Skeslien-Charles to discuss her novel, The Paris Library. Check back next week to see if your questions have been answered and to hear a reading from her book. Don't forget to subscribe to Storytime in Paris on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever it is you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. You can find the full Storytime in Paris playlist on parisundergroundradio.com/Storytime in Paris, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Paris Underground Radio. My name is Jennifer Garrity. Storytime in Paris is produced by me for the Paris Underground Radio Podcast Network. For more on this show and to discover more great podcasts, please visit parisundergroundradio.com. Thank you and happy listening.